The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of eager, Arizona territory as Naomi Barrett ran for her life, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. The year was 1878, and in this unforgiving frontier town, her tears had become more valuable than gold. Behind her, the sound of boots crunching on gravel grew louder, the men who had placed a bounty on her capture closing in with each desperate breath she took. Naomi ducked into an alleyway between the general store and saloon, her honey blonde hair escaping from its pins as she pressed her back against the rough wooden wall. 22 years old and already a fugitive, not for any crime she'd committed, but for what she knew. Her father's ledger, hidden in the folds of her skirt, contained enough evidence to bring down the most powerful man in the Arizona territory, Judge Reynolds, the man who had ordered her father's murder. "Find her," a gruff voice commanded. "Reynolds wants her alive, but he didn't say nothing about roughing her up a bit." Naomi closed her eyes, willing herself to disappear into the weathered boards at her back. 3 days ago, she had been the daughter of a respected banker. Now she was prey, with a price on her head that seemed to grow with every passing hour. "There's no way out of the alley, Miss Barrett," another voice called, closer now. "Why don't you save us all some trouble and come on out? The judge just wants to talk." Naomi knew better. Judge Reynolds didn't want to talk. He wanted to silence her permanently, just as he had silenced her father when he discovered the judge's scheme to steal land from honest settlers through forged deeds and rigged auctions. Her father had collected evidence for months, building a case to take to the territorial governor. But someone had informed Reynolds, and Thomas Barrett was found hanging from a tree outside town the very next morning, labeled a suicide by the corrupt local sheriff. With nowhere left to run, Naomi prepared herself for capture. She would not go easily. Her hand slipped to the small derringer hidden in her pocket, her father's last gift to her. "Always protect yourself, Naomi," he had said. "This world isn't kind to women alone." How right he had been. Just as the first bounty hunter appeared at the alley entrance, a strong hand grabbed her arm from behind. Naomi nearly screamed, but another hand clamped over her mouth. "Don't make a sound if you want to live," a deep voice whispered in her ear. "There's a door behind us. When I count to 3, we're going through it." Before she could process what was happening, she was being pulled backward through a concealed door into what appeared to be a storeroom. Her mysterious rescuer quickly shut the door, sliding a bolt into place just as the bounty hunters stormed into the alley. In the dim light filtering through a small, dusty window, Naomi finally saw her savior, a tall, broad-shouldered man with piercing blue eyes and a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore the clothes of a cowboy, dusty denim, a well-worn leather vest, and boots with spurs that made the faintest jingle when he moved. A revolver hung at his hip, and the way he carried himself told her he knew how to use it. "Who are you?" Naomi demanded in a harsh whisper, raising her derringer. "And why are you helping me?" The man regarded her with a calm that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Name's Yates, Yancey Yates." He tipped his hat slightly, as if they were meeting at a social rather than hiding from killers. "As for why I'm helping you, Miss Barrett, let's just say I've got no love for Judge Reynolds or the men who do his dirty work." Yancey moved to the window, carefully peering out. "They're still searching the alley. We need to stay put for a while." He turned back to her, his expression softening slightly. "You can lower that pea-shooter. If I wanted to turn you in, I'd have done it already." Naomi hesitated but finally lowered the derringer. "How do you know my name? And how did you know I'd be in that alley?" "Everyone in town knows your name by now," Yancey replied, settling onto a crate. Reynolds has put a price on your head that would make most men forget their conscience. $2,500 for you, alive and unharmed." $2,500, Naomi gasped. "For what?" "I've done nothing wrong." "It's not what you've done," Yancey said, his voice dropping. "It's what you know." His eyes flickered to the slight bulge in her skirt where she had hidden her father's ledger. "That book you're carrying must be mighty important." Naomi instinctively placed a hand over the hidden ledger. "Important enough that my father died for it." Yancey nodded solemnly. "I figured as much. Thomas Barrett was a good man, one of the few honest men left in Eager." He glanced at the door. "The bounty notice mentioned something specific. They put a price on your tears." "My tears?" Naomi's brow furrowed in confusion. "That's what Reynolds is telling people that he wants you brought to him crying, begging for mercy. He thinks it'll break your spirit, make you hand over whatever evidence you have against him." Yancey's jaw tightened. "The man's more twisted than I thought." Outside, they could hear the bounty hunters cursing, their footsteps retreating down the alley. "They're giving up for now," Yancey said, "but they'll be back with more men. Reynolds won't stop until he has what he wants." "What am I supposed to do?" Naomi asked, her voice breaking slightly. "I can't stay in this storeroom forever." Yancey stood, offering her his hand. "No, you can't. But I know someplace safer. Somewhere outside town where Reynolds' men won't think to look." He paused, his blue eyes meeting hers. "I can't give you your $2,500 worth of tears, Miss Barrett, but I can offer something else instead." "And what might that be, Mr. Yates?" Naomi asked, cautiously accepting his hand. His lips curved into a slight smile. "Protection. A way out of this mess. And perhaps, when all is said and done, something neither Reynolds nor his men could ever understand, a chance at a real life." Something in his steady gaze made Naomi believe him, despite every reason she had to distrust strangers. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Yancey's expression turned serious. "Because I've spent too many years watching men like Reynolds take whatever they want without consequence. Your father was trying to stop that, and now it falls to you." He tightened his grip on her hand. "Besides, I've got my own score to settle with the judge." "What did he do to you?" Naomi asked. "That's a story for another time," Yancey replied, moving to a rear door. "Right now, we need to focus on getting you someplace safe. My horse is behind the building. We'll have to move fast and stay low." Naomi nodded, gathering her courage. "I'm ready." Yancey cracked the door open, surveying the area. "Coast is clear. Stay close to me." They slipped out into the fading afternoon light, hugging the shadows as they made their way to where a magnificent chestnut stallion stood waiting, tethered to a hitching post. "This is Rusty," Yancey said, patting the horse's neck. "Fastest horse in the territory and smarter than most men I know." He boosted Naomi up into the saddle before swinging up behind her. "Hold on tight. We're going to have to ride hard." As they galloped out of town, Naomi clutched the saddle horn, acutely aware of Yancey's strong arms around her as he held the reins. The desert landscape blurred around them, the setting sun painting the rocky mesas in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. For the first time since her father's death, Naomi felt a flicker of hope. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the thundering hoofbeats. "I've got a cabin in the mountains," Yancey called back. "It's about 3 hours' ride. We should make it by nightfall." As they rode, Naomi reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, her biggest concern had been helping her father at the bank and politely declining yet another marriage proposal from the local physician's son. Now, she was fleeing for her life with a mysterious cowboy who seemed to have his own vendetta against Judge Reynolds. The terrain gradually changed as they rode, the flat desert giving way to pine-covered foothills. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of juniper and pine. Naomi, exhausted from days of fear and little sleep, found herself leaning back against Yancey's chest, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "We're nearly there," he said, his voice close to her ear. "You doing all right?" "Yes," Naomi replied, straightening. "Just tired." "You've been through hell," Yancey observed. "Most women would have broken down by now." "I'm not most women," Naomi said firmly. "And I refuse to give Reynolds the satisfaction of seeing me cry. He's taken enough from me already." Yancey guided the horse off the main trail onto a narrow path that wound through thick stands of ponderosa pine. "That's the spirit. Hold onto that fire, Miss Barrett. You're going to need it." As darkness settled fully over the mountains, they emerged into a small clearing where a sturdy log cabin stood, sheltered by towering pines. A small creek bubbled nearby, its gentle sound a stark contrast to the violence they had fled. Yancey dismounted first, then reached up to help Naomi down. Her legs felt unsteady after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly, falling against his chest. His arms came around her automatically, steadying her. For a moment they stood like that, closer than propriety allowed. Naomi could feel the strong beat of his heart, smell the leather and pine scent of him. Something electric passed between them before she pulled away, flustered. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I'm more tired than I realized." "No need to apologize," Yancey said, his voice rougher than before. He cleared his throat. "Let me get Rusty settled, and then we'll get you inside." While Yancey led his horse to a small corral adjacent to the cabin, Naomi took in her surroundings. The cabin appeared well-maintained but not recently occupied. It stood in stark isolation, the nearest neighbor probably miles away. "You live here?" she asked when Yancey returned. He shook his head as he unlocked the cabin door. "Not permanently. It's a place I come to when I need to, think, or disappear for a while." He ushered her inside, quickly lighting a lantern that cast a warm glow over the simple interior. The cabin consisted of one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a bed tucked in the corner. A curtained-off section presumably contained a washstand or storage. "It's not much," Yancey said, sounding almost apologetic as he moved to light the fire. "But it's defensible and far enough from town that Reynolds' men won't find it easily." "It's perfect," Naomi replied honestly, sinking into one of the chairs. After days of running and hiding, the simple cabin felt like a sanctuary. Once the fire was crackling in the hearth, Yancey rummaged through cupboards, producing canned beans, jerky, and coffee. "Not exactly a feast, but it'll keep us going." As he prepared a simple meal, Naomi studied him. In the firelight, she could see details she had missed before: a thin scar running along his jawline, the calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He moved with an economy of motion that suggested military training. "You weren't always a cowboy, were you?" she asked. Yancey glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "What gave me away? The way you move. The way you assess the situation in town. You've had training." "Cavalry," he confirmed, setting a plate of beans before her. "Served 6 years with the Union during and after the war. Came west after my discharge." "And now," Naomi pressed. "What do you do now?" Yancey sat across from her with his own plate. "A little of everything. Ranch work mostly. Some scouting for the army when they need someone who knows the territory." He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Occasionally I help people who need it." "Is that what I am? Just another person who needs help?" His blue eyes held hers for a long moment. "You're much more than that, Miss Barrett. You're possibly the only person brave enough to stand against Reynolds and his corruption. That makes you special in my book." Naomi felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. She focused on her food, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Yancey spoke again. "Tomorrow, I need to know exactly what's in that ledger. If we're going to bring Reynolds down, I need to understand what we're working with." Naomi nodded, relief flooding through her at not having to face this alone anymore. "It's all their names, dates, properties, bribes. My father documented everything. He was very methodical, smart man," Yancey said, "but dangerous information to have." "Yes," Naomi said softly. "I found him, that morning," her voice caught. "They made it look like suicide, but my father would never. He wouldn't leave me alone like that." Yancey reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. His touch was warm, calloused, but gentle. "I'm sorry, Naomi. No one should have to go through that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and somehow it broke something loose inside her. The tears she had been holding back for days welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to blink them away. "I promised myself I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give Reynolds what he wanted." "These aren't the tears Reynolds wants," Yancey said gently. "He wants tears of fear, of defeat. These are tears of grief for a good man. There's no shame in them." His understanding was her undoing. Naomi covered her face with her hands as sobs racked her body, the full weight of her loss finally crashing down on her. Through her grief, she was vaguely aware of Yancey moving around the table, kneeling beside her chair and drawing her into his arms. "That's it," he murmured against her hair. "Let it out. You're safe here." Naomi clung to him, this virtual stranger who had risked everything to help her, and wept until she had no tears left. When she finally quieted, she realized she was practically in his lap, her face pressed against his chest, his arms holding her securely. "I'm so sorry," she said, embarrassed, trying to pull away. Yancey kept his arms around her. "Don't apologize. You needed that." "I've ruined your shirt," she said, noting the damp patches where her tears had fallen. He smiled down at her, his eyes gentle. "It'll dry." Reluctantly, he helped her back into her chair. "You should rest. Take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." Naomi wanted to protest it was his cabin, after all, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. She nodded gratefully. Later, as she lay in Yancey's bed, listening to his steady breathing from his bedroll near the fire, Naomi realized something that should have frightened her, but instead gave her comfort. In less than a day, this man had become the only person in the world she trusted completely. Morning sunlight filtered through the cabin's single window, casting dappled patterns across the rough-hewn floor. Naomi awoke slowly, momentarily disoriented before remembering the events of the previous day. The cabin was quiet, and for a panicked moment, she feared Yancey had abandoned her. Then she heard the rhythmic sound of chopping wood outside. She rose quickly, smoothing her rumpled dress as best she could. Her reflection in a small mirror hanging on the wall revealed a young woman she barely recognized, her blonde hair tangled, dark circles beneath her eyes, her normally fair complexion pale with fatigue. Yet there was something different in her expression, a determination that hadn't been there before. Outside, she found Yancey splitting logs with powerful, precise strokes. He had removed his shirt in the morning heat, and Naomi paused in the doorway, unable to help noticing the play of muscles across his tanned back and shoulders. Scars crisscrossed his skin, evidence of a life that had clearly seen its share of violence. As if sensing her presence, Yancey turned, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm. "Good morning," he said, reaching for his shirt draped over a nearby stump. "Hope the chopping didn't wake you." "It didn't," Naomi assured him, averting her eyes as he pulled his shirt on. "I slept better than I have in days." "Good, you needed it." He gestured toward a bucket of fresh water near the cabin. "Creek water. It's cold but clean if you want to wash up. I've made coffee." grateful for the opportunity to refresh herself. Naomi spent several minutes splashing the cool water on her face and attempting to bring order to her hair. When she returned inside, Yancey had laid out a simple breakfast of biscuits and dried fruit. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "For everything." Yancey nodded, his expression serious. "Today we need to make plans. Reynolds won't stop looking for you. He probably has men combing every town within 50 miles by now." "What can we possibly do against someone like him?" Naomi asked. "He controls everything in the county, the sheriff, the judge's bench, even the territorial representative." "Not everything," Yancey corrected. "He doesn't control the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson, and he certainly doesn't control the territorial governor." He took a sip of his coffee. "But before we can approach either, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. May I see the ledger?" Naomi retrieved the leather-bound book from its hiding place in her skirt and handed it to him. Yancey opened it carefully, his expression growing increasingly grave as he turned the pages filled with her father's meticulous handwriting. "Your father was thorough," he said finally, looking up. "Reynolds has been systematically stealing land from settlers, particularly those who hold water rights. He's amassed nearly half the county through forged documents, intimidation, and occasionally murder disguised as accidents or suicides." "Like my father," Naomi said quietly. "Yes." "But Thomas did something very smart here," Yancey said, tapping the ledger. "He didn't just document the crimes, he followed the money. These entries show large deposits to accounts in Reynolds' name at banks in Phoenix, Santa Fe, even San Francisco. That's what will convince the authorities the money trail. So we take this to the U.S. Marshal in Tucson?" Naomi asked hopefully. Yancey frowned. "It's not that simple. We need to make sure this evidence reaches the right hands. Reynolds has influence not as much in Tucson as in Eager, but enough to be dangerous. And we need to consider your safety. Once word gets out that you're cooperating with the law, his men will redouble their efforts to find you." "I'm not afraid," Naomi declared, straightening her shoulders. "You should be," Yancey said bluntly. "Fear keeps you alert, but you shouldn't let it stop you." He closed the ledger. "I know someone in Tucson, a former ranger turned lawyer. He has connections to both the marshal's office and the territorial governor. If anyone can help us navigate this safely, it's him." "How soon can we reach Tucson?" 3 days hard ride if we're careful. We'll need supplies and we'll have to avoid the main roads." Yancey studied her face. "It won't be easy. Are you certain you're up for this?" "My father died for this information," Naomi said firmly. "I won't let his sacrifice be in vain." Yancey nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Then we'll leave tomorrow at first light. Today we'll prepare." He hesitated. "There's something else we need to discuss, your appearance." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "My appearance? Reynolds' men are looking for a young woman traveling alone or with a strange man. We need to change that narrative." He seemed uncharacteristically uncomfortable. The simplest solution would be to travel as husband and wife. Naomi felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, it's just for safety," Yancey clarified quickly. "A married couple draws less attention, and it gives us a reason to be traveling together." "Of course," Naomi agreed, trying to sound practical rather than flustered. "That makes perfect sense." "Good. Then there's the matter of your clothes. That dress is too recognizable and not practical for hard riding." Yancey rose and went to a trunk in the corner. After rummaging for a moment, he produced a bundle of clothing. "These belong to my sister. They should fit you well enough." Naomi accepted the bundle, surprised. "Your sister?" A shadow crossed Yancey's face. "Emily. She died 5 years ago, fever." He cleared his throat. "She was about your size." "I'm sorry," Naomi said softly, understanding now another dimension of his solitary existence. "It was a long time ago," he said, though his expression suggested the wound was still fresh. "She would have liked you, I think. She had the same kind of spirit." The unexpected compliment warmed Naomi in ways she didn't quite understand. "Thank you. I'll take good care of her things." "I know you will," Yancey said. He moved toward the door. "I'll give you some privacy to change. I need to check our supplies and make sure Rusty is well rested for tomorrow." After he left, Naomi unfolded the bundle to find a practical split riding skirt, a cotton blouse, and a leather vest clothes that would allow her to ride astride comfortably while still maintaining some semblance of femininity. They smelled faintly of cedar from the trunk, but otherwise seemed well preserved. She changed quickly, surprised at how comfortable the clothing felt compared to her restrictive dress. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back looked capable, independent, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. When Yancey returned, he stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in her transformation. "How do I look?" Naomi asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Like a woman who could outride the devil himself," he said, a smile playing at his lips. Emily would be pleased. They spent the rest of the day preparing for their journey. Yancey showed Naomi how to use a Winchester rifle, insisting that her small derringer, while useful for close encounters, wouldn't be sufficient if they ran into real trouble. "I've never fired a rifle before," she admitted, the weapon feeling awkward and heavy in her hands. "It's not so different from your derringer," Yancey assured her. "Just more powerful." He positioned himself behind her, his arms coming around to adjust her grip. "Hold it firmly against your shoulder to absorb the recoil." Naomi was acutely aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. His hands, calloused but gentle, guided hers on the smooth wood and metal of the rifle. "Now, take a deep breath," he instructed, his voice low near her ear. "Let half of it out, then squeeze the trigger slowly. Don't pull it." Naomi did as instructed, surprised when the rifle roared and kicked against her shoulder. A tin can placed on a stump 50 yards away jumped and clattered to the ground. "I hit it," she exclaimed, turning toward Yancey with delight. He was smiling, genuine pleasure lighting his blue eyes. "Natural talent. Try again." By late afternoon, Naomi could consistently hit targets at various distances, and she developed a healthy respect for the weapon's power. As they walked back to the cabin, rifle in hand, she felt a strange new confidence. For the first time since her father's death, she wasn't just running or hiding, she was preparing to fight back. Inside the cabin, Yancey spread a map on the table. "We'll head south through the mountains," he said, tracing a route with his finger. "It's longer than taking the main road, but we're less likely to encounter Reynolds' men." "How many do you think he is looking for me?" Naomi asked, studying the map. "Enough to make our journey interesting," Yancey replied grimly. "Reynolds has friends among the ranchers and mining companies. He can call in favors, offer rewards. We need to assume that anyone we meet could potentially be working for him." "That's a cheerful thought," Naomi said wryly. Yancey's expression softened. "I know it sounds bleak, but remember, not everyone is corrupt. There are still good people in this territory who are tired of men like Reynolds. We just need to be cautious until we know who we can trust." As evening approached, Yancey prepared a heartier meal than the previous night: rabbit stew with wild onions and herbs he had gathered from around the cabin. The savory aroma filled the small space, reminding Naomi that despite everything, life continued. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Naomi's curiosity got the better of her. You mentioned you have your own score to settle with Reynolds. What did he do to you? Yancey set down his spoon, his expression darkening. It's not a pleasant story. Neither is mine, Naomi pointed out, but we're in this together now. I'd like to understand. Yancey nodded slowly. Fair enough. He took a deep breath. After the war, I came west with my sister and her husband, James. We settled near Eager, built a small ranch. Things were going well until Reynolds took an interest in our land. We had good water rights, you see. His jaw tightened. At first, it was offers to buy. When James refused, things got ugly. Cattle disappeared. Our well was poisoned. Then one night, our barn was burned down. James was inside, trying to save the horses. He didn't make it out, Naomi guessed softly. No, the official story was that he knocked over a lantern, but there was no reason for him to have a lantern in the barn that night. Yancey's hands had clenched into fists on the table. After that, Emily wasn't the same. The grief, the stress. When fever hit that winter, she didn't have the strength to fight it. And Reynolds took your land anyway, Naomi said, understanding now the depth of his hatred for the judge. Yes. Somehow, James had signed papers I'd never seen, taking out loans against the property. After his death, the bank, Reynolds Bank, foreclosed. Yancey's eyes met hers. Your father tried to help us, you know. He argued that the documents were forged, but he couldn't prove it. That was 4 years ago. I think maybe that's what started him looking more closely at Reynolds' dealings. I'm so sorry, Naomi said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. It was a long time ago, Yancey said, though the pain in his voice belied his words. But when I heard about your father, when I saw Reynolds' men hunting you, I knew I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself. So this is about revenge, Naomi said, withdrawing her hand. Justice, Yancey corrected firmly. Not just for my family or yours, but for everyone Reynolds has hurt. This territory deserves better. Something in his passionate declaration resonated with Naomi. This wasn't just about personal vendetta, it was about standing up for what was right, about creating the kind of world her father had believed in. To justice, then, she said, raising her cup in a toast. Yancey's serious expression gave way to a small smile as he raised his own cup. To justice. Later, as they prepared for bed, Naomi hesitated. I should take the bedroll tonight. You should have your bed back. Yancey shook his head. I'm fine by the fire. You take the bed. But Naomi, he said, his voice gentle but firm, you're going to need all your strength for the journey ahead. Please take the bed. There was something in the way he said her name that made further argument impossible. She nodded, retreating to the bed in the corner. As she drifted toward sleep, watching the firelight play across Yancey's features as he cleaned his revolver, Naomi realized something surprising. Despite the danger that awaited them, despite the uncertainty of their mission, she felt more alive, more purposeful than she had in years. And much of that feeling was due to the quiet, determined man who had risked everything to help her. Dawn broke misty and cool over the mountains, birds calling to each other in the pines surrounding the cabin. Naomi awoke to find Yancey already up, saddling Rusty and a second horse she hadn't seen before, a dappled gray mare with intelligent eyes. Where did she come from? Naomi asked, stepping outside in Emily's clothes, her hair braided simply down her back. This is Willow, Yancey said, patting the mare's neck. She belongs to a friend who lives about a mile west of here. I rode over at first light to borrow her. You'll need your own mount for the journey. Naomi approached the mare cautiously, offering her hand for the horse to sniff. Willow nickered softly, nudging Naomi's palm with her velvety nose. She likes you, Yancey observed. That's good. She can be particular about her riders. She's beautiful, Naomi said, stroking the mare's neck. Please thank your friend for me. I will when we return. Yancey finished securing their provisions to the saddles. "We should eat something before we leave. It'll be a long day of riding." After a quick breakfast, they mounted their horses and set off, leaving the cabin behind. Naomi felt a pang of regret as it disappeared from view for one night. It had been a sanctuary, a place where she had begun to process her grief and find her courage. The trail Yancey chose wound through dense forest, occasionally emerging onto rocky outcroppings that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. They rode in comfortable silence much of the time, Yancey occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife. Around midday, they stopped in a small meadow to rest the horses and eat some of the jerky and hardtack Yancey had packed. Sitting on a fallen log, Naomi massaged her thighs, already feeling the effects of the long ride. "Sore?" Yancey asked, handing her a canteen. "A bit," she admitted, taking a long drink of the cool water. "I haven't ridden like this in years." "You're doing well," he said. "Especially for someone who probably learned to ride side saddle," Naomi laughed. "My father insisted I learn both ways. He said a proper lady should know how to ride side saddle for social occasions, but a smart woman should know how to ride astride in case she needed to outrun trouble." "Your father sounds like he was ahead of his time," Yancey remarked. "He was," Naomi agreed, her expression softening with memory. "After my mother died when I was 12, it was just the two of us. He raised me to be independent, educated. He used to say that the West was changing and women would need to change with it." "Smart man," Yancey said. "This country needs more women who can think for themselves." "Is that what you look for in a woman, Mr. Yates?" Naomi asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Yancey seemed equally surprised by the question. He was quiet for a moment before answering. "I suppose it is, though I haven't given much thought to that sort of thing in recent years." "No special someone waiting for you somewhere?" Naomi pressed, telling herself it was mere curiosity rather than personal interest that prompted the question. "No," Yancey said simply. "My work doesn't lend itself to settling down." "And what exactly is your work?" Naomi asked. "You mentioned ranch work and scouting, but I sense there's more to it than that." Yancey's expression became guarded. "Let's just say I help right wrongs when I can." "A vigilante," Naomi suggested. "I prefer freelance justice facilitator," Yancey replied with a hint of a smile. "The law doesn't always reach far enough or move fast enough in these parts. Sometimes people need help that isn't strictly official, like rescuing women with prices on their heads." "Exactly like that," Yancey agreed, his blue eyes warming as they met hers. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps of kindred spirits bound by more than just circumstance. But before either could pursue the feeling, the distant sound of hoofbeats broke the stillness. Yancey was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his revolver. "Mount up," he said tersely, quickly and quietly. They were back in the saddle within seconds, Yancey leading them deeper into the forest, away from the trail. They rode in tense silence, the sounds of their pursuers, for that was surely what they were, growing neither louder nor fainter. "They're following our trail," Yancey said grimly. "We need to lose them." He led them down a rocky slope toward a fast-flowing stream. "We'll ride in the water for a while," he explained. "It'll wash away our tracks." The icy mountain water splashed up to their knees as their horses picked their way carefully downstream. After about half a mile, Yancey guided them up a nearly invisible game trail on the opposite bank, one that wound steeply upward through dense underbrush. They emerged onto a ridge overlooking the valley they had just left. Below, they could see 4 riders following their original path, stopping at the stream where their tracks disappeared. "Reynolds' men," Naomi whispered. Yancey nodded. "Bounty hunters, most likely. See the way they're dressed." not regular ranch hands or lawmen. They watched as the men conferred, then split up, two continuing downstream, two heading upstream. "We need to keep moving," Yancey said. "They'll eventually find where we left the water." They rode hard for the rest of the day, taking every opportunity to obscure their trail: rocky ground, dense forest, even doubling back occasionally to leave false trails. By sunset, Naomi was exhausted, her body aching from the grueling pace. When Yancey finally called a halt in a sheltered hollow surrounded by pine trees, Naomi practically fell from the saddle. Her legs buckled as she hit the ground, and Yancey caught her before she could fall. "Easy," he said, supporting her with an arm around her waist. "You're not used to riding like this." "I'm fine," Naomi insisted, though she made no move to pull away from his support. "Just tired." "We'll make cold camp tonight," Yancey said, helping her to a fallen log. "No fire, it's too risky." As Yancey tended to the horses, Naomi massaged her aching legs and surveyed their surroundings. The hollow was well hidden, invisible from the trail below. Above them, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, countless pinpricks of light in the vast expanse. Yancey returned with their bedrolls and some food: beef jerky, dried apples, and hard biscuits. Not the most appealing meal, but Naomi was too hungry to care. "You think we lost them?" she asked as they ate. "For now," Yancey said, "but they're persistent. Reynolds is paying them too well for them to give up easily." "How far to Tucson?" "2 more days of hard riding if we're lucky," Yancey replied. "We'll need to be even more careful tomorrow. We'll be leaving the mountains, which means less cover." Naomi nodded, then winced as a particularly sharp cramp seized her thigh. Yancey noticed immediately. "Your muscles are seizing up," he said. "Here." He moved to kneel before her, his hands going to her leg. Naomi stiffened. "What are you doing?" "Helping," Yancey said simply. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Naomi nodded. Yancey's strong hands began to massage her thigh, working the knotted muscles with firm, practiced movements. Naomi bit her lip, caught between pain and a different, more confusing sensation that his touch elicited. "Relax," Yancey instructed softly. "Tensing only makes it worse." Naomi tried to obey, focusing on her breathing as his hands moved expertly over her leg, finding and releasing points of tension. Gradually, the pain subsided, replaced by a pleasant warmth. "Better?" he asked, looking up at her. In the starlight, his face was cast in silver and shadow, his eyes reflecting pinpoints of light. Naomi swallowed, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, his hands on her leg, his face turned up to hers, the quiet darkness surrounding them. "Yes," she managed. "Thank you." Yancey nodded, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary before he withdrew. "You should rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I'll take first watch." As Naomi settled into her bedroll, she was acutely conscious of Yancey sitting nearby, his back against a tree, revolver across his lap as he scanned the darkness. Despite the danger that had forced them into this situation, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt strangely content. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. In just 2 days, Yancey Yates had become essential to her world, not just as a protector or ally, but as something more, something she wasn't yet ready to name. The night passed without incident, though Naomi slept fitfully, her dreams filled with shadowy pursuers and the memory of Yancey's hands on her leg. When she finally woke fully, the eastern sky was lightening with the first hint of dawn, and Yancey was already preparing to break camp. "No sign of trouble," he reported when he saw she was awake, "but we should move out quickly." They ate a hurried breakfast, then mounted up and continued their journey south. The terrain gradually changed as they descended from the mountain's pine forests, giving way to scrubby juniper, and eventually to the distinctive saguaro cacti and mesquite trees of the desert. The heat increased as the morning wore on, the sun beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. Naomi was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Yancey had given her, though nothing could fully shield her from the desert's furnace-like atmosphere. Around midday, they crested a rise, and Yancey suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. He dismounted, motioning for Naomi to do the same, and led the horses behind a large outcropping of rocks. "What is it?" Naomi whispered, her heart racing. "Dust," Yancey said, pointing to the horizon where a faint cloud rose against the blue sky. "Riders, moving fast. The bounty hunters." "Maybe. Or it could be an army patrol or a cattle drive." Yancey's expression was grim. "Either way, we can't risk being seen. We'll wait here until they pass." They hunkered down in the meager shade of the rocks, the horses standing quietly behind them. As they waited, the Arizona heat became almost unbearable. Sweat trickled down Naomi's back, and her mouth felt parched despite regular sips from the canteen. "Here," Yancey said, producing a bandana from his pocket. He soaked it with water from his canteen and handed it to her. "Put this around your neck. It'll help cool you down." Naomi gratefully accepted the damp cloth, sighing with relief as she pressed it against her overheated skin. "How much longer do we need to wait?" "Until we're sure they've moved on," Yancey replied, his eyes never leaving the distant dust cloud. "Could be an hour. Could be more." "Tell me about Tucson," Naomi said, trying to distract herself from the heat and tension. "I've never been there." Yancey's expression softened slightly. "It's different from Eager. Bigger, more established. The Spanish were there long before Americans arrived. You can see it in the architecture, hear it in the language on the streets." His voice took on a wistful quality. "There's a mission church, San Xavier del Bac, about 10 miles south of town. The most beautiful building in the territory, maybe in the whole West. White adobe that glows like gold at sunset." "You make it sound magical," Naomi observed. "Parts of it are," Yancey acknowledged. "Other parts are just like any frontier town, dusty, rough, full of people trying to make their fortune or escape their past." He glanced at her. "My friend Jacob, the lawyer I mentioned, lives in one of the nicer sections. You'll be comfortable there while we sort things out." "While we sort things out," Naomi repeated, frowning. "You make it sound like I'll be sitting safely aside while you handle everything." Yancey looked surprised. "That's not what I meant. But Jacob's house is secure, and you'll need somewhere to stay while we present your father's evidence to the authorities." "I should be the one presenting it," Naomi insisted. "It was my father who compiled it. I'm the witness to Reynolds' threats and actions." "And you're also the person he wants silenced at any cost," Yancey countered. "Walking into the marshal's office might as well be painting a target on your back." "I'm already wearing a target," Naomi said heatedly. "I won't hide in your friend's house while you take all the risks." "This is my fight too, Yancey." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it seemed to affect him. His expression softened. "You're right," he conceded. "It is your fight. I'm just trying to keep you safe." "I know," Naomi said, her anger fading, "and I'm grateful. But I need to see this through all the way through. I owe it to my father." Yancey studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll face this together. But you'll still stay at Jacob's. It's safer than a hotel, and we both need somewhere secure to rest and plan." Naomi agreed to this compromise, satisfied that he was beginning to see her as a partner in their mission rather than just someone to be protected. The dust cloud eventually disappeared from the horizon, and after waiting another hour to be safe, they resumed their journey. The afternoon stretched on endlessly, the sun beating down with merciless intensity. They spoke little, conserving their energy and water as they pushed southward. As dusk approached, Yancey led them to a small arroyo, a dry streambed lined with cottonwood trees that offered blessed shade and a natural depression where they could camp without being easily spotted. "We'll rest here for the night," Yancey said as they dismounted. "There's a spring about 50 yards upstream. We can refill our canteens and let the horses drink." While Yancey tended to the horses, Naomi gathered what little dry wood she could find. Unlike the previous night, they would risk a small fire, the need for hot food and coffee, outweighing the potential danger of being spotted in this remote location. By the time Yancey returned with full canteens, Naomi had a modest fire going and was preparing a simple meal from their provisions. "You're full of surprises, Miss Barrett," Yancey remarked, settling beside the fire. "Where did a banker's daughter learn to make camp?" "My father believed in practical education," Naomi replied, stirring the pot of beans she had set to heat. "He took me camping in these mountains every summer. Said a woman should know how to fend for herself if need be." "He raised you well," Yancey observed, the firelight playing across his features as he watched her. "He tried," Naomi said softly. "After my mother died, I think he was terrified of leaving me unprepared for the world. He taught me everything he thought I might need: banking, riding, shooting, even basic survival skills." "He couldn't have known how soon you'd need them," Yancey said. "No," Naomi's voice caught. "He always thought he had more time." Yancey reached across the fire and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "He would be proud of you, Naomi. Not many women or men, for that matter, would have the courage to do what you're doing." His touch and words sent a flutter through her chest that had nothing to do with grief or fear. Naomi looked down at their joined hands, wondering at how natural it felt, how right, despite the brief time they had known each other. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "After this is over, I mean. After we've brought Reynolds to justice." Yancey withdrew his hand, his expression becoming unreadable in the flickering firelight. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "For so long the idea of bringing down Reynolds has been everything." "There must be something else you want from life," Naomi pressed gently. "Something beyond justice or revenge." Yancey was quiet for so long that Naomi thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and reflective. "There was a time when I thought about having a ranch again. A place of my own, maybe a family someday." A sad smile touched his lips. "Simple dreams. The best kind," Naomi said. "My father used to say that happiness isn't found in grand ambitions but in simple pleasures: a home, work you believe in, people you love." "Wise words," Yancey agreed. He looked up at her, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. "And what about you, Naomi? What do you want after this is over?" The question caught her off guard. In the chaos following her father's death, she had thought only of survival and justice, not of the future beyond those immediate goals. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The bank will likely pass to my father's partner, who has a son he's grooming to take over eventually. I have some money of my own, enough to start somewhere new if I wanted to." She paused, considering. "I think I'd like to stay in the territory, though. Despite everything, it feels like home." "It has a way of getting into your blood," Yancey agreed. "The vastness of it, the freedom, the dangers," Naomi added with a small smile, "those too." Yancey's expression grew serious. "Naomi, when this is over, when Reynolds is dealt with, you should know that a sudden crack of a twig from the darkness beyond their camp silenced him mid-sentence. In one fluid motion, Yancey was on his feet, revolver drawn and aimed toward the sound. "Who's there?" he called sharply. "Show yourself." "Easy, Cowboy," a gruff voice replied from the darkness. "I mean no harm." A figure emerged slowly into the firelight, an older man with weathered features and long gray hair tied back with a leather thong. He wore the practical clothes of a prospector, and a mule laden with equipment stood a few yards behind him. "Name's Caleb Winters," the man said, keeping his hands visible. "Just a prospector looking for a bit of company beside my campfire. Saw your light and thought I'd say hello." Yancey didn't lower his weapon. "You're a long way from any claims, prospector." "That I am," Caleb agreed amicably. "Been working some color up in the Catalinas, on my way to Tucson to resupply." His rheumy eyes shifted to Naomi. "Evening, madam." Naomi nodded cautiously, uncertain whether this chance encounter represented danger or merely an interruption. "Mind if I join you?" Caleb asked. "Got some fresh jerky I'd be happy to share. Mule deer. Made it myself." Yancey and Naomi exchanged a glance. Turning away, a lone traveler went against frontier hospitality, yet caution was necessary given their circumstances. "You're welcome to share our fire," Yancey said finally, holstering his revolver but keeping his hand near it. "But we're turning in soon. Early start tomorrow." "Much obliged," Caleb said, leading his mule closer to the camp. He began to unsaddle the animal with practiced ease. "Headed to Tucson yourselves, I gather." "Just passing through," Yancey replied noncommittally. Caleb nodded, seeming to understand Yancey's reticence. "Don't blame you for being cautious. Roads aren't as safe as they used to be." He produced a leather pouch from his saddlebag. "Jerky, as promised. Best in the territory, if I do say so myself." The old prospector proved to be a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of his decades in the West, the gold rush in California, close encounters with Apache raiders, the changing face of the frontier as railroads and civilization pushed ever westward. Despite their initial wariness, Naomi found herself enjoying the man's company. There was something comforting about his weathered face and easy manner, reminding her of the old-timers who used to visit her father's bank with tales of the early days. "Been prospecting these mountains for night on 20 years, Caleb was saying as they shared coffee after their meal. "Never struck it rich, but made enough to keep going. It's the searching that gets in your blood, you know. The possibility that the next creek or the next hillside might be the one." "Sounds like a lonely life," Naomi observed. "It has its moments," Caleb acknowledged, "but there's a freedom to it that I wouldn't trade for all the comfort in the world." He glanced between Naomi and Yancey. "You two been married long?" The question caught Naomi by surprise. Before she could respond, Yancey smoothly took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that seemed remarkably natural. "Just a few months," he said, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that made her breath catch. "Still getting used to it, aren't we, darling?" Naomi managed a nod, playing along with their agreed-upon cover story despite the sudden fluttering in her chest at Yancey's touch and endearment. "Newlyweds, eh?" Caleb chuckled. "Thought as much. Got that look about you." He sipped his coffee. "Where you headed after Tucson?" "We're considering our options," Yancey replied easily. "My wife has family in San Francisco. We might head there, or we might try our luck further south." "California's changing," Caleb said, shaking his head. "Too many people, too many rules. If you want my advice, head southeast New Mexico territory. Still plenty of opportunity there for folks willing to work hard." The conversation continued pleasantly, until Caleb finally yawned and announced he was turning in. He declined their offer to share their camp, preferring to set up his own bedroll a short distance away, for which Naomi was secretly grateful. Once the prospector had retired and was soon snoring softly, Yancey moved closer to Naomi, speaking in a low voice. "I don't think he's a threat, but I'll keep watch tonight anyway," he said. "Get some rest." You think it was just coincidence him finding our camp? Naomi whispered. Probably, Yancey replied. He seems genuine enough, but we can't be too careful. Naomi nodded, settling into her bedroll. As she drifted toward sleep, she found herself thinking about the easy way Yancey had taken her hand, the natural way he had called her darling. It had been part of their cover story, of course. Yet something in his eyes, in the gentle pressure of his hand, had felt like more than mere play acting. Or perhaps that was just what she wanted to believe. Morning came clear and bright, the desert air cool before the heat of the day set in. Caleb was already up when Naomi awoke, brewing coffee over a small fire and chatting amicably with Yancey. "Morning, Mrs. Yates," the prospector called cheerfully. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Naomi accepted a cup gratefully. Noting that Yancey looked tired, he had apparently maintained his vigil through the night despite his assessment that Caleb posed no threat. They shared a simple breakfast, after which Caleb surprised them with an offer. "I know a shortcut to Tucson," he said, rolling up his bedroll. "Trail that cuts through the foothills. Saves half a day's ride and avoids the main road. Be happy to show you, seeing as we're headed the same way." Yancey hesitated, clearly weighing the potential risk against the benefit of a faster route. "It's not on any map," Caleb added. "Old Apache Trail, most folks don't know about it." "Why would you share this with strangers?" Yancey asked, his natural caution asserting itself. Caleb shrugged. "Enjoyed your company. Besides, you two seem like decent folks. World needs more of those." He grinned, revealing a gap where two front teeth should have been. "And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't mind the company myself. Gets lonely out here." After a brief, silent exchange with Naomi, Yancey agreed to follow Caleb's shortcut. They broke camp quickly and set out, the old prospector leading the way with his laden mule. True to his word, Caleb guided them onto a barely visible trail that wound through a series of rocky foothills. The path was challenging, in places narrow and steep, but it did indeed seem to be cutting miles off their journey. As they rode, Caleb continued to entertain them with stories of his adventures. There was something soothing about the old man's constant chatter after days of tension and wariness. By midday, Naomi found herself genuinely enjoying the journey despite the heat and physical discomfort. They stopped to rest in the shade of an overhanging cliff, the horses and Caleb's mule gratefully drinking from a small spring that bubbled up from between rocks. "Should reach Tucson by nightfall at this pace," Caleb announced, splashing water on his face. "Assuming you folks can keep up with an old man." He winked at Naomi. "We'll do our best," she replied with a smile. As they prepared to mount up again, Caleb suddenly froze, his expression changing. "Get down," he hissed urgently. "Riders coming." They ducked behind rocks as the sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. From their hiding place, they could see 5 riders on the trail below, hard-looking men armed with rifles and revolvers. "Bounty hunters," Yancey whispered, his hand going to his gun. "Same ones who were following us yesterday." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Bounty hunters, what manner of trouble are you two in?" Before either could respond, one of the riders called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still desert air. "We know you're up there, Barrett. Show yourself and you won't get hurt. Judge Reynolds just wants to talk." Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. Their cover was blown, these men knew exactly who she was. Caleb looked between them, his expression confused but not accusatory. "Barrett." "As in Thomas Barrett's daughter from Eager," Naomi nodded mutely, the old prospector's face hardened with sudden understanding. "I knew Thomas. Good man, heard what happened to him." He spat on the ground. "Reynolds is a snake, always has been." "You'll help us?" Yancey asked, surprised. "Damn right I will," Caleb said firmly. "Never could abide injustice." Besides, these bounty hunters are a plague on decent folk. He reached for his rifle. I know these hills better than they ever could. We can lose them. The riders below had dismounted and were beginning to climb toward their position. No time to run, Yancey said grimly. We'll have to fight. Wait, Caleb said, a crafty look crossing his weathered features. I've got a better idea. He reached into one of his saddlebags and pulled out several small canvas sacks. Blasting powder. Was saving it for my claim, but this seems more important. Understanding dawned on Yancey's face. You thinking what I'm thinking? Little rockslide ought to discourage them, Caleb confirmed with a grin. There's a loose section just around that bend, if we can set charges without them seeing us. I'll cover you, Yancey decided. Naomi, stay here with the horses. Be ready to ride the moment we're back. Before she could protest, the two men were moving stealthily along the ridge, keeping low to avoid being spotted by the approaching bounty hunters. Naomi watched anxiously as Caleb and Yancey worked quickly to position the blasting powder. The bounty hunters were getting closer, calling out taunts and threats as they climbed. Come on out, Miss Barrett. There's nowhere to run. The judge is paying top dollar for those tears of yours. Just as the first bounty hunter came into view around a bend in the trail, there was a tremendous explosion. The hillside seemed to shudder, and then tons of rock and debris cascaded down onto the trail, effectively cutting off their pursuers. Through the dust and confusion, Yancey and Caleb came running back, grinning like schoolboys despite the danger. That'll hold them for a while, Caleb crowed as they mounted up. They'll either have to clear that rockslide or go back down and find another way around. Either way, we've bought ourselves several hours. They rode hard after that, following Caleb's shortcut through increasingly rugged terrain. The old prospector led them unerringly, choosing paths that seemed invisible until they were upon them. By late afternoon, they crested a rise and saw Tucson spread out before them in the valley, below a mixture of adobe buildings and wooden structures gathered around the Santa Cruz River, with the imposing towers of San Xavier del Bac visible in the distance. Made it, Caleb said with satisfaction. Now, where exactly are you folks headed? I know most everyone in Tucson worth knowing. We're looking for Jacob Ellsworth, Yancey said. He's a lawyer, lives on the north side of town, I believe. Caleb nodded. Ellsworth, good man, helped me with a claim dispute last year. Didn't charge me a cent when he found out I couldn't pay. He pointed toward the northern edge of town. His place is just beyond that grove of cottonwoods, big adobe house with a red tile roof. As they approached the outskirts of Tucson, Caleb pulled his mule to a halt. This is where we part ways, I'm afraid. I've got business on the south side of town. You're welcome to come with us, Naomi offered. After everything you've done, Caleb shook his head. Best I'm not seen with you. Reynolds has eyes everywhere, even in Tucson. Better for all of us if no one connects me to you. He tipped his hat. Been a pleasure, Miss Barrett. Hope you nail that bastard to the wall. Before they could properly thank him, the old prospector was riding away, raising a hand in farewell without looking back. Remarkable man, Naomi observed as they watched him go. Salt of the earth, Yancey agreed. The kind of people who make this territory worth fighting for. He turned to her, his expression serious. Are you ready for what comes next? Naomi straightened in the saddle, drawing strength from the certainty that had been growing within her throughout their journey. I've been ready since the day they killed my father, she said. Let's finish this. Jacob Ellsworth's home was exactly as Caleb had described, a sprawling adobe hacienda with a red tile roof, surrounded by a well-tended garden that seemed miraculous in the desert setting. A Mexican servant answered their knock, regarding them with polite suspicion until Yancey mentioned his name. They were shown to a cool, tiled parlor where they waited only briefly before Jacob Ellsworth appeared, a tall, slender man in his 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Yancey Yates," he said warmly, clasping Yancey's hand. "It's been too long, my friend." His gaze shifted to Naomi. "And this must be Miss Barrett. Caleb sent word that you were coming." "Caleb?" Yancey asked, surprised. "But he just left us at the edge of town." Jacob smiled. "He has his ways. Sent a boy with a message not 10 minutes ago." He gestured for them to sit. "Now, I understand you have evidence against Judge Reynolds. Evidence concerning land fraud and possibly murder." As Naomi produced her father's ledger and began explaining its contents, she was struck by the competent, focused way Jacob absorbed the information. He asked precise questions, took careful notes, and occasionally nodded with grim satisfaction as particularly damning details were revealed. "This is extraordinary," he said finally, closing the ledger. "Your father built a case that would be admissible in any court in the country. The problem, of course, is getting it before a judge who isn't in Reynolds' pocket." "That's why we came to you," Yancey said. "You have connections to the territorial governor." "I do," Jacob confirmed, "and to the U.S. Marshal's office, but we must move carefully. Reynolds has friends even here in Tucson, businessmen who benefit from his corrupt practices, politicians who receive his donations." "How long will it take?" Naomi asked, trying to mask her impatience. Jacob considered. "To build a proper case and ensure it reaches the right authorities." "A week, perhaps 2. He held up a hand as Naomi began to protest. "I understand your urgency, Miss Barrett, but rushing this would be a mistake. We must be thorough, leave no room for Reynolds to wriggle free." "In the meantime, Reynolds' men will keep looking for us," Yancey pointed out. "They know we're in Tucson by now." "You'll stay here," Jacob said firmly. "My home is secure and I have loyal staff. No one will find you here while we prepare." He rose. "Now you must be exhausted from your journey. Maria will show you to your rooms. We'll discuss our next steps over dinner." As they followed the servant upstairs, Naomi felt a curious mixture of relief and frustration. They had reached Tucson safely, found an ally with the means to help them, yet the prospect of waiting weeks for justice chafed at her. The room Maria showed her to was luxurious by frontier standards, a large bed with clean linens, a washstand with a porcelain basin, even a copper bathtub that the servant promised would be filled with hot water shortly. "Senor Ellsworth says to rest," Maria told her with a kind smile. "Dinner will be at 7. Left alone, Naomi sank onto the bed, suddenly aware of every ache in her body from days of hard riding. The soft mattress felt like heaven after sleeping on the ground, yet she found herself missing the open sky, the crackling fire, and Yancey's steady presence nearby. A knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Yancey standing there, looking as tired as she felt but with a determined set to his jaw. "Jacob wants to talk to us privately before dinner," he said. "He has news." They found Jacob in his study, a room lined with leather-bound law books and maps of the Arizona Territory. He looked up as they entered, his expression grave. "Word has reached me that Reynolds is coming to Tucson," he said without preamble. "Apparently he's scheduled to meet with the territorial representative about funding for a new courthouse in Eager." "When?" Yancey asked sharply. 3 days from now. He'll be staying at the Palace Hotel." Jacob's eyes met Naomi's. "This changes things. We may not have weeks to build our case." "It's an opportunity," Yancey said, pacing the room. "Reynolds outside his territory, away from the men and systems he controls directly." "Yes and no," Jacob cautioned. "He'll have protection, his own men, likely some local deputies he's paid off. And he still has friends here who would warn him if we approached the marshal directly." "So what do we do?" Naomi asked, feeling the momentum they had built begin to slip away. Jacob was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled slowly, a smile that reminded Naomi of Yancey at his most determined. "We set a trap," he said. "One that Reynolds won't be able to resist." Over dinner, served in Jacob's elegant dining room by his efficient Mexican staff, they formulated their plan. It was both simple and audacious. They would use Reynolds' obsession with capturing Naomi against him. "We leak word that Miss Barrett has been seen in Tucson," Jacob explained, pouring wine for his guests. "We suggest that she's desperate, running out of options and money. We make it known that she frequents a certain establishment, my friend Alina's boarding house on the west side of town." "You want to use me as bait," Naomi said, understanding immediately. "In a manner of speaking," Jacob acknowledged, "but with significant protections in place. Alina's boarding house has certain architectural advantages that make it perfect for our purpose." "Multiple exits," Yancey guessed. "Hidden rooms." "Precisely," Jacob confirmed. "It was built during more dangerous times when Apache raids were common. There are passages that connect to adjacent buildings, a cellar with a tunnel that leads to a stable a block away." "And Reynolds won't know about these features?" Naomi asked. "Alina has kept them secret for decades. Only those she trusts implicitly know of their existence." Jacob leaned forward. "Meanwhile, I'll have documents prepared, arrest warrants ready to be served the moment Reynolds makes his move. My friend Marshal Davis will be standing by with deputies we know are not in Reynolds' pocket." "It could work," Yancey said cautiously, "but it puts Naomi at considerable risk." "I'll do it," Naomi said firmly before Jacob could respond. "I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If using me as bait will bring Reynolds to justice, I'm willing." Yancey looked as if he wanted to protest, but something in Naomi's expression stopped him. Instead, he nodded slowly. "We'll need to plan every detail carefully. No room for error." "Of course," Jacob agreed. "We have 2 days to prepare. In the meantime, you should both rest and recover from your journey. You'll need all your strength and wits about you when the time comes." After dinner, Naomi found her way to a small courtyard garden at the center of Jacob's hacienda. The night air was cool and fragrant with flowering jasmine. Above, stars crowded the vast desert sky, seeming close enough to touch. She sat on a stone bench, trying to quiet the tumult of emotions within her: anticipation, fear, determination, and something else. Something centered around the tall cowboy who had become her protector and partner in this dangerous enterprise. As if summoned by her thoughts, Yancey appeared in the doorway leading to the courtyard. He paused when he saw her, as if uncertain whether to join her or withdraw. "Please," Naomi said, patting the bench beside her. "I could use the company." Yancey crossed to sit beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in the darkness. "Are you sure about this plan?" he asked after a moment. "It's not too late to reconsider." "I'm sure," Naomi replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "For too long, Reynolds has operated with impunity, hurting people, taking lives. It has to end." "It will," Yancey promised, "one way or another." Something in his tone made Naomi turn to study his profile in the starlight. "Yancey, promise me something." "Anything," he replied without hesitation. "Promise me this will end with justice, not vengeance." She laid a hand on his arm. "I know what Reynolds did to your family and I understand your hatred for him, but I don't want more bloodshed. I want him to face a judge and jury for his crimes, a real judge, not a bullet." Yancey was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. "For years, all I've thought about was making him pay, eye for an eye." He covered her hand with his own. "But you're right, that's not justice, it's just more violence. Your father deserved better. So did Emily and James. He turned to face her fully. I promise, Naomi, we'll do this right. Relief washed through her. Thank you, she whispered. They sat in companionable silence, hands still joined, the night air cool around them. Naomi was acutely aware of Yancey's proximity, of the warmth of his hand over hers, of the way the starlight silvered his dark hair. Naomi, he said finally, her name almost a caress on his lips. When this is over. Yes, she prompted when he didn't continue. Yancey turned toward her, his blue eyes serious in the dim light. When this is over, when Reynolds is facing justice and you're safe, I'd like. That is, I hope. To Naomi's surprise, the normally confident cowboy seemed at a loss for words. She smiled, understanding dawning. Are you trying to court me, Mr. Yates? She asked softly. A smile touched his lips. I believe I am, Miss Barrett. Rather poorly, it seems. I wouldn't say that, Naomi murmured, her heart beating faster. In fact, I think you're doing just fine. Something changed in the air between them, a tension, a current of possibility. Yancey's hand came up to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. May I? He whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips. In answer, Naomi leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. The kiss was sweet, tender, full of promise and over far too quickly as Yancey pulled back, his expression a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. I'm sorry, he said. That was presumptuous of me. It wasn't, Naomi assured him, her fingers coming up to touch her still tingling lips. It was. Perfect. Yancey smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face and made Naomi's heart skip a beat. Perfect, he echoed softly. Like you. They might have kissed again, but the sound of footsteps approaching the courtyard made them move apart. Jacob appeared in the doorway, a sheaf of papers in his hand. Ah, there you are, he said, apparently oblivious to what he had interrupted. I've been working on the legal documents we'll need. There are a few details I wanted to discuss with you both. As they followed Jacob back inside, Yancey's hand brushed against Naomi's, a brief, subtle contact that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her. In the midst of danger and uncertainty, something beautiful had begun to take root. Something that gave Naomi hope not just for justice, but for a future beyond it. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Jacob's home became a command center for their operation messengers coming and going. Maps and diagrams spread across tables, details scrutinized and plans refined. Through careful channels, word was leaked that Naomi Barrett had been seen in Tucson, desperate and running out of options, seeking refuge at Alina Montoya's boarding house. Naomi spent hours with Alina herself, a formidable woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense manner, learning the layout of the boarding house, the location of every hidden passage and secret exit. Yancey, meanwhile, worked with Marshal Davis and his most trusted deputies, positioning men at strategic locations around the boarding house. On the morning of the third day, the day Reynolds was due to arrive in Tucson, Naomi stood before a mirror in Jacob's home, hardly recognizing herself. She wore a simple dress borrowed from Alina's niece, her hair styled differently than her usual manner, her appearance altered just enough that she wouldn't be immediately recognizable to anyone who might have seen descriptions of her, but not met her in person. You'll do fine, Jacob assured her, adjusting his own tie as he prepared for his role in the plan. Remember, you only need to be visible enough to confirm the rumors of your presence. Once Reynolds takes the bait, you'll be moved to a secure location before he can act. Naomi nodded, drawing a deep breath to steady her nerves. And if something goes wrong? Then you use the escape route we've planned, Yancey said from the doorway where he had been watching silently. No heroics. Your safety comes first. Something in his tone made Naomi turn to study him. He looked different today, cleaner, more polished. He had shaved his trail beard, and his usually unruly dark hair was neatly combed. He wore a clean shirt under his vest, and his revolver, while still present at his hip, seemed more discreet somehow. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Yates," she observed with a small smile. A hint of color touched his tanned cheeks. "Thought I should look respectable if I'm going to be courting a banker's daughter," he replied, the words light but his eyes serious as they met hers. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a breathless messenger, one of the stable boys Jacob had positioned near the train station. "Reynolds is here," the boy announced. "Just got off the eastbound train with 4 men. They're headed to the Palace Hotel right now." Jacob nodded, handing the boy a coin. "Good work, Miguel. Go tell Marshal Davis, then resume your post. Report any movement from Reynolds or his men." The boy dashed off, and Jacob turned to Naomi and Yancey. "It's time," he said simply. "Are you ready?" Naomi squared her shoulders. "I've been ready since the day they killed my father." Alina's boarding house was a 2-story adobe structure on the western edge of Tucson. Its exterior unremarkable, but its interior a maze of rooms and hidden passages built during more dangerous times. Naomi was installed in a second-floor room with a small balcony overlooking the street, visible enough to be noticed, but with 3 different escape routes mapped out if danger approached. The plan was simple. Naomi would be seen occasionally on the balcony or through the window, establishing her presence. Word would continue to spread through Tucson that Thomas Barrett's daughter was hiding there. When Reynolds inevitably came to capture her either himself or through his men, Marshal Davis and his deputies would be waiting, armed with arrest warrants and the evidence from Thomas Barrett's ledger. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. Naomi alternated between sitting near the window, reading a book to maintain the appearance of normalcy, and pacing the room, her nerves stretched taut as piano wire. Alina brought her tea and sandwiches around midday, the older woman's calm confidence somewhat soothing Naomi's anxiety. "All is proceeding as planned," Alina reported. "Your Senor Yates is positioned across the street with 2 of the marshal's men. Jacob has confirmed that Reynolds knows of your presence here." "He's not my Senor Yates," Naomi protested weakly, feeling color rise to her cheeks. Alina's knowing smile suggested she saw right through the denial. "As you say, Querida, but a woman my age recognizes the signs." She patted Naomi's hand. "He is a good man, strong, honorable. Those are rare qualities in this world." "Yes," Naomi agreed softly, "they are." As the afternoon wore on, Naomi's anxiety grew. What if Reynolds didn't take the bait? What if he sent so many men that the marshal's forces were overwhelmed? What if their carefully constructed plan fell apart at the crucial moment? She was standing at the window, watching the lengthening shadows as the sun began its descent, when she saw them 4 men approaching the boarding house with purpose in their stride. She recognized 2 of them as the bounty hunters who had pursued them in the mountains. The other 2 were strangers to her, but their hard faces and the way they carried themselves marked them as dangerous men. Heart pounding, Naomi stepped back from the window. This was at the moment they had been waiting for. But where was Reynolds himself? Had he sent his men to do his dirty work, or was he watching from somewhere nearby, waiting to see if they succeeded? A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Yes," she called cautiously. "It's me," came Yancey's voice, low and urgent. "Let me in." Naomi quickly opened the door. Yancey slipped inside, his expression tense. "Reynolds' men are here," he said. 4 of them approaching the front entrance. Reynolds himself is in a carriage across the plaza watching. What do we do? Naomi asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Stick to the plan, Yancey said. Let them come in. Alina will direct them to this room. When they try to take you, the marshal's men will move in. He took her hands in his. I'll be right outside in the hallway. No harm will come to you, I swear it. The conviction in his voice steadied her. I trust you, she said simply. Yancey's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, quickly, he bent and pressed a kiss to her forehead. For luck, he murmured before slipping back out into the hallway. Naomi positioned herself at the window again, making sure she could be seen from the street below. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her mouth felt dry as dust, but she forced herself to appear calm, even as she saw Reynolds' men enter the boarding house below. Minutes stretched like hours as she waited. She could hear muffled voices from downstairs, Alina's calm tones responding to more gruff questioning. Then footsteps on the stairs, heavy and deliberate, a sharp rap at the door. Miss Barrett, a male voice called. We have a message from a friend of your father's. May we come in? Naomi moved to the center of the room, her back straight, her chin raised defiantly. The door is unlocked, she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The door swung open to reveal two of Reynolds' men, the bounty hunters she had recognized from before. Their expressions shifted from false friendliness to predatory satisfaction when they saw her. Well, the taller one said, stepping into the room. Look what we found, Abe. Judge Reynolds will be mighty pleased. He put quite a price on those tears of yours, Miss Barrett. The second man, Abe said with a grin that made Naomi's skin crawl. Said he wants to see you crying when we bring you in. Judge Reynolds will be disappointed then, Naomi replied coldly. I have no tears to give him, only evidence of his crimes. The first man laughed. Brave talk from a cornered little bird. We'll see how brave you are when the judge gets his hands on you. They advanced into the room, clearly confident in their advantage. Naomi held her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. You're under arrest, gentlemen, a new voice announced from the doorway. Marshal Davis stood there, his badge gleaming on his chest, his revolver drawn and pointed at the bounty hunters. Drop your weapons, slowly. The bounty hunters froze, then began to reach for their guns. Before they could draw, Yancey appeared behind the marshal, his own revolver trained on them. I wouldn't, he advised coldly. The marshal said drop them. Outnumbered and outgunned, the bounty hunters reluctantly disarmed. As the marshal's deputies moved in to secure them, Yancey crossed to Naomi's side. Are you all right? He asked, his eyes scanning her face with concern. I'm fine, she assured him. But what about Reynolds? He's still out there. Not for long, Marshal Davis said with grim satisfaction. I've got men surrounding his carriage as we speak. He won't escape justice this time. They moved downstairs to find the boarding house's front parlor transformed into an impromptu command center. Jacob was there, conferring with one of the marshal's deputies. He looked up as they entered, relief evident on his face. Thank God, he said, crossing to Naomi. Everything went according to plan. Reynolds' other two men are in custody, and... He paused as a commotion at the front door drew everyone's attention. Judge Malcolm Reynolds was being escorted into the boarding house, his hands shackled behind his back, his normally imperious face flushed with rage. He was a tall man with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes that locked onto Naomi the moment he entered the room. Miss Barrett, he said, his voice dripping with venom, you've caused me quite a bit of trouble. Not half as much as you deserve, Naomi replied steadily. My father built a case against you that will see you hang for your crimes. Your father was a fool, Reynolds spat. And you're following in his footsteps. Do you think these charges will stick? I have friends in high places, girlfriends who understand the necessity of progress, even if it requires occasional sacrifices. Those friends will be running for cover when they see this evidence, Jacob said, stepping forward with Thomas Barrett's ledger. Every transaction, every forged deed, every bribe, all meticulously documented, and we have witnesses coming forward now that you're in custody. People who were too afraid to speak before. Reynolds' confident expression faltered slightly. This is preposterous. I'm a territorial judge. You can't simply arrest me on the word of a hysterical girl and some cowboy vigilante. Actually, I can, Marshal Davis said dryly. I have warrants signed by the territorial governor himself, based on evidence reviewed by the U.S. Attorney's Office. He nodded to his deputies. Take him to the jail. Keep him isolated from the other prisoners, especially his men. I don't want them coordinating stories. As Reynolds was led away, still protesting his innocence and threatening retribution, Naomi felt a curious lightness spread through her, as if a weight she had carried since her father's death was finally lifting. She turned to find Yancey watching her, a similar relief evident in his expression. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "We did it." "You did it," Yancey corrected gently. "Your courage made this possible, Naomi." She shook her head. "We all did it together." Jacob approached them, a smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "The marshal will need statements from both of you, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, I suggest we return to my home and celebrate this victory." The celebration at Jacob's hacienda that evening was subdued but joyful, a quiet dinner with Jacob, Yancey, and Naomi, joined by Marshal Davis and Alina. The conversation flowed easily, centered around the day's events and the legal proceedings that would follow. "Reynolds will be transferred to Phoenix for trial," the marshal explained over dessert. "Too many connections here in Tucson, despite our best efforts to keep things clean. The territorial governor has appointed a special prosecutor from California, someone with no ties to Arizona politics." "Will Naomi need to testify?" Yancey asked, his concern evident. "Almost certainly," Jacob replied. "As the primary witness and the daughter of the man who compiled the evidence, her testimony will be crucial." He glanced at Naomi. "It won't be easy. Reynolds' attorneys will try to discredit you, question your father's motives, suggest the evidence was fabricated." "I'm not afraid," Naomi said firmly. "I'll tell the truth and the evidence will speak for itself." "What about Reynolds' men?" Alina asked. "Those bounty hunters and the others who did his dirty work. Most will likely turn on Reynolds to save themselves," Marshal Davis predicted. "Men like that have no loyalty beyond the dollar. Once they realize Reynolds can't protect them anymore, they'll be falling over themselves to make deals." As the evening progressed, Naomi found herself growing contemplative. The immediate danger had passed, justice was in motion, yet she felt strangely unsettled. What would she do now? Return to Eager, where so many painful memories awaited? Start fresh somewhere else? And what of Yancey, the man who had risked everything to help her? The man whose kiss in the courtyard had awakened feelings she had never expected to experience amid such danger. She excused herself after a time, seeking the solitude of the same courtyard where they had shared that kiss. The night was clear and cool, stars blazing above in the desert sky. Naomi sat on the stone bench, letting the events of the past days wash over her, the fear, the courage, the determination, and through it all, Yancey's steady presence. She wasn't surprised when she heard footsteps approaching, nor when Yancey appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from within. He paused, as if asking permission to join her. "Please," she said, patting the bench beside her, an echo of their previous encounter in this same spot. Yancey crossed to sit beside her, his warmth a comfort in the cool night air. For a time they sat in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. "What will you do now?" Yancey finally asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Naomi sighed. "I'm not sure. I should return to Eager, I suppose. There's the house to settle, my father's affairs to put in order." She paused. "But I don't know if I can live there again with all those memories." "You could sell," Yancey suggested. "Start fresh somewhere else, perhaps." Naomi turned to look at him, his features half illuminated by the light spilling from the house. "What about you? Now that Reynolds is facing justice, what will you do?" Yancey was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I've spent so many years focused on bringing Reynolds down that I hardly know what to do without that purpose." He shifted to face her more fully. "But recently, I've started thinking about other possibilities." "Such as?" Naomi prompted gently. Yancey reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "Such as that ranch I mentioned, a place of my own, somewhere to build a life." His blue eyes found hers in the dim light. "A life I'd like to share if you're willing." Naomi's breath caught. "Yancey, are you—" "I know it's sudden," he interrupted, the words tumbling out now as if he feared losing his courage. "We've known each other only days. But these have been days of truth, Naomi stripped of pretense by danger and necessity. I know my heart better now than I ever have." His hand tightened around hers. "I love you. I think I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that alley, facing down Reynolds' men with nothing but a derringer and your courage." Naomi felt tears well in her eyes, not tears of fear or grief, but of a joy so unexpected and complete that it overwhelmed her. "They put a price on my tears," she whispered, remembering Reynolds' bounty. "But these aren't the tears he wanted." Yancey reached up to gently brush a tear from her cheek. "No," he agreed softly. "These are the tears of a woman who is loved, who is free." "Yes," Naomi said, leaning into his touch, "free to love you in return." His smile then was brighter than the stars overhead. "Is that your answer then? You'll share that life with me?" "Yes," Naomi said simply, her heart too full for elaborate declarations. "Wherever that life leads us." Yancey drew her into his arms, his kiss tender yet passionate, a promise of all they could build together. When they finally parted, he kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't have much to offer right now," he admitted. "Just my heart, my hands, and a dream." "That's all I need," Naomi assured him. "We can build the rest together." In the weeks that followed, events moved with surprising speed. Reynolds' case proceeded through the legal system, with Jacob Ellsworth guiding Naomi through every step of the process. As predicted, many of Reynolds' associates turned against him, providing additional testimony that strengthened the case. Naomi did indeed return to Eager, but not alone. Yancey accompanied her, standing by her side as she faced the painful task of closing her father's affairs. The town was changed, subdued, as if awakening from a long nightmare. With Reynolds' influence removed, people began to speak more freely about the corruption that had gripped the community. Some approached Naomi to express condolences for her father, admitting they had suspected foul play, but had been too afraid to speak out. Thomas Barrett's funeral was properly conducted, his body exhumed from the unmarked grave where Reynolds' men had buried him, and reinterred in the town cemetery with full honors. The service was attended by nearly everyone in Eager, a belated recognition of the man's courage and integrity. After the funeral, Naomi and Yancey walked arm in arm through the cemetery, pausing at another grave, a simple marker bearing the names of James and Emily Yates. "I never gave them a proper goodbye," Yancey said quietly. "Always too focused on revenge to allow myself to grieve." Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder. "We can say goodbye now," she suggested gently. "Together." They stood in silence for a time, paying their respects to the loved ones they had lost. As they finally turned to leave, Yancey seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden he had carried for years had begun to lift. "I found something at your father's house," he told Naomi as they walked back toward town. "A deed to a parcel of land southwest of here, near the border with New Mexico territory. It's in your name. Apparently your father purchased it for you as a birthday gift. He must have filed the paperwork just before he died," Naomi finished softly. "What kind of land is it?" "Good land," Yancey said, his eyes lighting up. "I rode out to see it yesterday while you were meeting with the bank. It's got water a year-round spring feeding a small creek. Some good grazing land, timber on the northern section. About 2,000 acres in all." Naomi smiled, understanding his excitement. "Enough for a ranch, more than enough," Yancey confirmed. "It would take work, of course. There's nothing built yet, just raw land, but the potential is there." "Our potential," Naomi said, squeezing his arm, "our future." They were married a month later in Tucson, with Jacob Ellsworth hosting the ceremony in his courtyard garden. Alina was there, as was Marshall Davis, Caleb the prospector, freshly bathed and sporting a new suit for the occasion, and a small gathering of friends both old and new. Naomi wore a simple white dress that Alina's niece had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of an elaborate veil. Yancey looked transformed in a new suit, though he admitted to feeling trussed up like a Christmas turkey in the formal attire. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the couple exchanging vows beneath an arbor covered in desert blooms. When Yancey kissed his bride, there was such tenderness in the gesture that several of the guests were moved to tears. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," he told Naomi later as they danced under the stars in Jacob's courtyard. "After everything with Reynolds, with losing Emily and James, I thought that part of my life was over." "And now?" Naomi asked, her eyes shining up at him. "Now I know it was just beginning," Yancey said, drawing her closer. "With you." After the wedding, they traveled to the land Thomas Barrett had left his daughter, a journey of several days through increasingly beautiful country. When they finally crested a rise, and Naomi saw their property spread before her rolling grassland bordered by pine-covered hills, a creek winding through it like a silver ribbon, she understood why Yancey had been so excited. "It's perfect," she breathed, taking in the untamed beauty of what would become their home. "Not yet," Yancey said, his arm around her waist, "but it will be." They camped that first night beside the creek, planning by firelight where they would build their house, their barn, their future. In the morning, Yancey began work on a temporary shelter, not much more than a lean-to, but sufficient to protect them while they constructed something more permanent. Over the following months, their ranch began to take shape. Yancey proved to be as skilled a builder as he was a horseman, and Naomi surprised herself with how quickly she adapted to the physical demands of frontier life. They worked from dawn till dusk most days, falling into bed exhausted but deeply satisfied with the progress they were making. Word of Reynolds' trial reached them intermittently through letters from Jacob. The evidence against the former judge was overwhelming, and despite his expensive lawyers and remaining political connections, his conviction seemed certain. "Jacob says the governor is considering naming the new courthouse in Eager after my father," Naomi told Yancey one evening as they sat on the porch of their nearly completed cabin. "The Thomas Barrett Hall of Justice." "Fitting," Yancey said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Your father stood for justice when it was dangerous to do so. He deserves to be remembered." Naomi leaned into his embrace, content in a way she had never imagined possible during those dark days after her father's death. "He would have liked you," she said softly, "would have approved of the man I married." "I hope so," Yancey replied. "I have a great deal to thank him for, not least of which is his remarkable daughter." As autumn turned to winter, their home was finally complete, a sturdy log cabin with a stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms and windows that caught the morning sun. They celebrated Christmas there, just the two of them, exchanging simple gifts and planning for the spring when they would begin to build their herd. The letter from Jacob arrived in January, delivered by a passing freight wagon. Reynolds had been found guilty on all counts: fraud, corruption, and murder. He had been sentenced to hang. Naomi read the news with a complex mixture of emotions: relief that justice had been served, sadness for the lives destroyed by Reynolds' greed, and a quiet determination to honor those lives by building something good and true on the foundation of their sacrifice. "How do you feel?" Yancey asked as she folded the letter. "At peace," Naomi said after a moment's reflection. "It doesn't bring my father back or Emily and James, but knowing Reynolds can never hurt anyone else, it matters." Yancey nodded, understanding. "It closes that chapter," he said. "Allows us to focus entirely on the next one." The next chapter began that very spring, with the purchase of their first cattle, a small herd of 30 head that Yancey selected carefully from a rancher near Tucson. They worked side by side to build corrals and fences, Naomi proving herself as capable on horseback as any cowhand. By summer, their ranch, which they had named New Hope, was beginning to prosper. They hired 2 local men to help with the expanding operation, built a bunkhouse for them, and began to make plans for further growth. It was on a warm June evening, as they sat together on their porch after a long day's work, that Naomi shared the news she had been suspecting for several weeks. "Yancey," she said, taking his hand in hers, "I'm going to have a baby." The look of pure joy that transformed his face was something Naomi knew she would remember all her days. Yancey gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious glass, his voice rough with emotion as he whispered his love and gratitude. "A family," he said wonderingly. "Our family." The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Yancey insisted on building a proper cradle, spending evenings carefully crafting it from pine harvested from their own land. Naomi sewed baby clothes from fabric purchased on a trip to Tucson, where Alina fussed over her and insisted on throwing an impromptu celebration for the expectant parents. Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1880, with Alina, who had traveled all the way from Tucson when Naomi's time grew near serving as midwife. They named him Thomas James Yates, honoring both their fathers. "He has your eyes," Naomi told Yancey as he held his son for the first time, his big hands gentle with the tiny bundle. "And I think he'll have your stubborn chin." "Poor child," Yancey said with a grin, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Let's hope he has your intelligence and kind heart to balance it out." As spring returned to their valley, bringing new growth and renewal, Naomi often found herself reflecting on the strange, dangerous path that had led her to this happiness. The price that had been put on her tears had led not to her destruction, but to her salvation, to justice, to love, to the family she now cherished. One evening, as she stood at the edge of their property with young Thomas in her arms and Yancey at her side, watching the sunset gild their growing ranch in golden light, Naomi was overcome with gratitude. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is our life," she said softly. "After everything that happened, to find such happiness." Yancey's arm tightened around her waist. "Remember what I promised you that first day, When Reynolds put a price on your tears, Naomi smiled, remembering, you said you couldn't give me my $2,500 worth of tears. You offered me love instead. Best bargain I ever made, Yancey said, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I intend to keep my end of it every day for the rest of our lives. As they turned back toward the warm lights of home, their son sleeping peacefully against Naomi's shoulder, she knew with absolute certainty that some promises were meant to be kept forever, and that love, freely given and gratefully received, was worth more than all the gold in the Arizona territory.